Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and a lot of you guys have asked me, what am I going to be maining for this brand new expansion? Am I sticking to Rogue, or am I going to be looking out for other classes? At the beginning of Shadowlands Alpha, I told myself that if Blizzard does something to Outlaw that I don't like, I am going to be a little bit more open-minded to looking for other new mains. Good thing the Blizzard did the opposite with Outlaw. Instead of ruining it, they made it much better. Huge fan of some of the utilities that rogues have gotten, with Sliciness returning, Poisons making a comeback, ability of Shiv, some changes to your grapple hook with a new talent to make it happen even faster for that fast mobility, a change to roll the bones, and so much more. I feel like makes Outlaw Rogue a very fun and a competitive spec going forward into the brand new rating tier as well as Mythic Plus. Which is why I'm going to be making this guide video to get you guys started with playing Outlaw Rogue when it comes to going forward with Shadowlands. First, if you guys want some useful links, down in the description we have a Discord link. You guys should totally join. It's the best place to reach me, and there you can also find a whole page for useful links where you can go to Raidbots Sim Your Character and download the add-on, where you can go and find out what are the best sims for things like best trinkets and even best legendaries, because all these things are going to change in the future. See, if you want to peep some of those links or ask me a question directly, link in the description for my Discord server, and you guys should definitely join. You'll be more than welcome. Diving back into the guide, let's talk about the covenants. I'm going to get this question at some point or another, and last we simmed, the covenants were within 1 to 3% of effectiveness within one another. Sometimes certain covenant abilities are a little bit better in very key, specific, even niche situations. Soulbinds, same thing. Conduits for those covenant abilities, same thing. So when it comes to choosing your covenant, you can either go with something that's the best if you are, let's say, rank 1 Raider or rank 1 Mythic Plus team, or maybe you're trying to go for rank 1 PvP. But all of these covenants are within 1% of each other. They're like a ratio that makes the least amount of difference in terms of the effectiveness you do. Your gear, legendaries, and the way you play your character, playing well versus playing poorly, are going to be the biggest influencers of your damage. And all these covenants are only going to be at most 3%. So my best advice is to choose whichever covenant you enjoy, whichever zone you like, the transmog you like, and even the abilities you like that fit your playstyle, as they're very, very close to one another and are pretty competitive. Outlaw Rogue and stats. What stats are you looking forward to? This expansion is going to be a little bit different. It'll be similar to how other expansions have started, but it's also going to be slightly different. Agility is going to be the best stat for you, besides main hand weapon DPS. Definitely want to make sure you have a powerful, meaty weapon, a one-hand sword, mace, fist, or an axe for you to perform all your Outlaw Rogue abilities. You can have dagger offhand if you want to, but then agility is going to be the top stat for you. That means, which is a good thing, because anything that's an upgrade for you in terms of item level is generally going to be an upgrade, even if it doesn't have your best in slot secondary stats. Talking about secondary stats, versatility and critical strike are very close to one another, and they honestly should be equal to one another. You want to get as much crit and as much versa in equal amounts, not too much of one, not too much of another. Second best stat out of those two competing for rank 1 spot is haste, and finally mastery. But even mastery isn't that bad anymore because it's so behind haste that it doesn't really matter too much. Next, let's talk about the talents for PvE. And these talents are most likely going to change a little bit based on which legendaries you end up getting, or which gear you end up getting, or even conduits you acquire for your rogue. So simming these for the best possible detail for your character might be something you might want to consider. But the ones I'm going to be running for the most part are going to be Quick Draw in the level 15 row for the extra damage, the acrobatic strikes for the range, which can be really good in Mythic Pluses, staying out of the bad fire on the ground or whatever, while also being able to reach the boss. At level 30, I'll usually go with Deeper Stratagem, as that one sims the best for me for single target. However, Marked for Death is also another solid option. I also will go with Cheat Death in level 35 row so I can make mistakes and learn from them, and then continue playing the game instead of sitting dead. At level 40, I'll generally run Prayer on the weak, but can go with Dirty Tricks and maybe Mythic Pluses. Then we have level 45, where I'll generally go Alacrity. That one seems to be the strongest so far. And at level 50, usually Blade Rush, but there's an argument to be said about Killing Spree for the burst, maybe in certain AoE situations, or Dancing Steel if you're constantly pulling lots of mobs 24/7 within Mythic Plus dungeons. But generally Blade Rush ends up being better because it doesn't have any target cap, so you can pull really big and have that nice bursty Blade Rush from time to time. When it comes to your consumables, we have a couple things to get through. First of all, gems. Right now, Leviathan's Eye of Agility is a very, very good gem. Maybe even too good. To the point where right now it's so good that Blizzard is probably going to end up nerfing it. Afterwards, you want to use critical strike gems as well as versatility gems to balance out your stats. So if you have too much verse, go for more crit gems. If you have too much crit, go for verse gems or sim your character. When it comes to enchants, same thing goes for rings. You have your rings to buff your versatility and then ring enchants to buff your critical strike. Again, you want to play this balancing game. Too much versatility, pop some crit on those bad boys. Just like gems, we'll be utilizing ring enchants in a similar style, using versatility or critical strike to balance out our stats. The main hand weapon enchant should be Celestial Guidance, and enchant for your offhand is Sinful Revelation. However, if you dive into a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons, then you'll want to run with Lightless Force, as that is going to be the best one for M+. With Lightless Force, you want to put both of those on your weapons. We have a lot more enchants with this expansion, with Boots being able to be enchanted with Eternal Agility, Chestpiece being able to be enchanted with Eternal Skirmish, and Cloak enchanted with Fortified Leech. You don't necessarily need this one, but extra stamina and extra survivability is never a bad thing for rogues. When it comes to your flasks and potions, you'll want to run Spectral Flask of Power, which will give you agility for an hour. Potion of Phantom Fire is a great potion for pure single target, but if you do a lot of Mythic Pluses or planning to do a lot of dungeons, Potion of Spectral Agility is also recommended. Also, you can now do extra things with your weapons, like applying Shadow Core Oil for a single target. Or if you're doing a lot of Mythic Pluses, you use the Sharpening Stones for AoE. You also can apply Heavy Desolate Armor Kit to your chest armor if you need extra survivability, which will come in handy for raids. When Outlaw rogues eat, they eat big with Feast of Gluttonous Hedonism. However, it is quite expensive early in this expansion. If you want to get yourself steak a la mode or sweet Silver Gill sausages, those will also be quite handy. And if you can somehow afford it, Veiled Augment Runes are also going to be very handy. Let's take a look at some of the conduits that you might want to pick up for your Outlaw rogue. The best conduit is going to be Count the Odds, where Ambush, Slaughter, which is not an ability anymore in the game, that's something that Blizzard still needs to remove, as well as Dispatch have an 18% chance that scales with the value of this conduit, give you an extra chance to grant Roll the Bones combat enhancement buff that you do not already have for 5 seconds. So as you're spamming dispatches or getting those vanish ambushes on the enemy, you have a chance to gain buffs you do not already have. That means a 1 buff can become 2 buff very quickly, 2 buff can become a 3 buff, and even a 4 buff very quickly. So because Outlaw loves buffs, Count the Odds is going to be the best for us for both Mythic Plus as well as single target. Sleight of Hand is another good one, allows Roll the Bones to have a higher chance to give you more than 1 buff. So this is a really good one as it improves our odds of getting better buffs. It's a decent conduit, but not as good as Count the Odds. Triple Threat is a straightforward one, where Sinister Strike has a low chance to strike again with both weapons after it strikes an additional time. This is an interesting buff, but it doesn't proc that often. Back in the beta, it used to be this really funny thing where you would slice and dice your enemy up with a bug, but since the bug is no longer in the game, this conduit is not as good. Finally, we have Ambidextry, which used to be at some point best in slot for Outlaw rogues, but has had its mastery increase heavily nerfed. This one might be okay in certain Mythic Plus situations, maybe if you're playing some very mastery heavy playstyle and you're completely fine with the mastery RNG of Outlaw, then it might have some uses, but generally not a good one. Before starting your DPS rotation, you'll first want to apply Instant Poison and Numbing Poison for your weapons. Those are going to be the 2 poisons that will be the best for most PvE content. Then you'll want to Stealth, press Roll the Bones right before you open on a target to receive a buff. Open up with an Ambush into Adrenaline Rush, and feel free to press your Covenant ability immediately during this moment. Then build combo points up until 5 or 6. Feel free to Vanish Ambush if you have the energy here in the opener, and then press Between the Eyes. Press Sinister Strike once into Slice and Dice. Then continue with your rotation, where you will build combo points with Sinister Strikes as well as procs of pistol shots to 5 or 6 combo points. But then the way you spend your combo points is going to be depending which abilities are off cooldown and if Slice and Dice needs refreshing. Try to maintain between the eyes on the enemy as much as possible. Don't let your roll the bones buff fall off. And also make sure slice and dice never falls off. Don't overcap combo points either. Like if you're sitting on 5 combo points and you have a pistol shot ready to go, just use dispatch, then consume pistol shot opportunity proc. Also, roll the bones. In this expansion, it's less necessary to constantly reroll them. 1, because the ability is on a cooldown, but 2, if you want to roll them, there are only a few conditionals. If you have Ruthless Precision, which I like to call the shark buff, you want to keep that as long as you can. Broadsides, which gives you extra combo points, you want to keep that as long as you can. And Skull and Crossbones, you want to keep that one as long as you can. The other 3 buffs you can re-roll out early, but I know a lot of you guys didn't like the re-roll mechanic of Outlaw, so if you want to not re-roll, you won't be severely punished. Now let's talk a bit about some of the legendaries available for Outlaw. The best one right now is going to be Celerity, where Adrenaline Rush does extra damage now, and your Slice and Dice has a chance to give you random Adrenaline Rush. This is very similar to Vision of Perfection from Battle for Azeroth, and functions in a very passive way, but it ends up being a really good legendary for all PvE situations. Concealed Blunderbuss is another one that's Outlaw specific. When Sinister Strike hits an additional time, there's a 40% chance that your pistol shot will fire 2 additional times. This can give you a little bit extra burst for the spec, and also a lot more combo points. It does have a good enough proc rate in my opinion where it could be useful, but not the strongest legendary right now. Green Skins Wickers is the Deadshot trait from Battle for Azeroth, or a Bracer legendary from Legion, with all the same nook and crannies, allowing your pistol shot to do extra damage. This one still is a very solid option if you do need a little bit more of a burstier playstyle with your Outlaw, but because Between the Eyes has a much longer cooldown, you don't get to use it much often. Guile Charm is an interesting one. Take advantage of the natural ebb and flow of combat, causing your Sinister Strikes to gradually increase their damage, dealt by 10%. This effect continues to stack. So basically this is the buff mechanic of green buff, yellow buff, red buff, in a very, very similar way. But the damage is a lot lower than the original green buff, red buff mechanic. So this is a cool legendary, but right now it's not really looking all that strong in comparison to the others. Another legendary that's also really good for Outlaw is Mark of the Master Assassin. While stealth is active and for 4 seconds after breaking stealth, your crit strike is increased by 100%. If you need a bursty situation for big AoE or single target crit damage, then Outlaw with this type of playstyle can do well with it. It's a very niche legendary where you will be using it in certain fights, maybe even in Mythic Pluses. But if you want a legendary that's probably the best for everything, I would probably run with Celerity. I would say that Outlaw Rogue is looking a lot more competitive with this expansion. It's a very fun spec with some of its RNG being offset, allowing you to keep roll the bones but having slice and dice for that consistency. The change with Between the Eyes allows you a little bit more crit oriented playstyle with a bit more guarantee of your abilities critting, which is never a bad thing. They changed to the Blade Flurry as well to become a little bit more CDR based, allows you more uptime of Blade Flurry in AoE packs, even if Outlaw AoE is capped to only 5 targets. It still has a lot of mobility, lots of survivability, plenty of extra crowd control. It does lose the range stun with Between the Eyes, but I don't think it will be enough to hold the spec back. I think Outlaw is going to be actually very competitive in this raid tier as well as in the Mythic Plus season. The M Plus has always been an AoE playstyle without having to sacrifice too much on single target, and Outlaw still is really good at that. Lots of AoE without too much sacrifice on pure single target playstyle and output. So I think this spec is going to be in a great spot going forward. I'm very excited to check out Outlaw once the raid is open and see how well this spec competes against others. And I'll probably make video guides on the other specs as well once I have a little bit more time this week or next week in order to get more familiar with some of the recent changes. I have majority of the conduits, and I might even be able to start making some legendaries for the other specs as well. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I'm very excited to jump into Outlaw Rogue for the raid or Mythic Pluses, and if anything needs to be updated for maybe new builds for Outlaw, then of course I'll come back and make a video for those said builds. But this is going to be my general guide for the first season of this expansion. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, I'll see all of you in another video.